We skipped our child's wedding because our dog was too sick to be left alone, and when they got upset, we decided to give them the same excuse for every important event. Now they're calling us petty and saying we deserved it. I'm posting here because I honestly don't know if we crossed a line or if this is just one of those situations where adult kids think everything should revolve around them once they hit certain milestones. My spouse and I are both in our mid-50s. We have one child in their late 20s. They've been independent for a long time. They moved out early, built their own life, and over the years, the relationship has shifted from close to formal. Not hostile, just distant. They have always said we're cold or controlling, which I don't agree with. We're not emotional people. We show care by being consistent and responsible, not by hovering. A big point of tension for years has been that they married into a very involved family. Their in-laws are everywhere. Holidays, birthdays, random weekends. We're often told plans last minute or after decisions are already made. I've swallowed that more times than I can count because I didn't want to be the difficult parent. We've also had our dog for over a decade. He's old now. He's had health problems for years. Anyone who has dealt with an aging pet knows it's not something you can just ignore. He's not a convenience. He's part of the household. He's also been steady when things with our child felt strained. I won't pretend that doesn't matter to me. A few weeks before the wedding, our dog had a serious health scare. We spent days going back and forth to the vet. Nothing dramatic enough to hospitalize him, but enough that his routine changed. He couldn't be left alone overnight safely. This wasn't a sudden excuse pulled out on the wedding day. This was ongoing. The wedding itself required travel. Not across the world, but far enough that it would mean an overnight stay. When we told our child we might not be able to attend because of the dog, they immediately started offering solutions. A pet sitter, boarding, a neighbor, even paying for it themselves. I understand they thought they were being helpful, but every option came with risks we weren't comfortable with. Boarding has always stressed him. Strangers don't know his signs. Neighbors have their own lives. We tried to explain that this wasn't about money or convenience. It was about responsibility. That didn't land. The conversation quickly shifted to how disappointed they were, how important this day was, how parents are supposed to be there no matter what. At no point did it feel like our concerns were taken seriously. It felt like we were being told that if we didn't comply, we were failing some unspoken test. So we made the decision not to go. Both of us. It wasn't impulsive. We talked it through. We sent a message the morning of the wedding explaining we couldn't make it and wished them well. We didn't cause a scene. We didn't show up late. We stayed home and took care of what needed taking care of. After the wedding, the response we got was not quiet disappointment. It was anger. Long messages about how hurt they were, how embarrassed they felt explaining our absence, how they'd never forget that we chose a dog over them. That's when I stopped feeling sympathetic. I want to be clear, this wasn't about choosing one over the other. This was about being put in a position where there was no acceptable answer unless we did exactly what they wanted. And when we didn't, the reaction wasn't understanding, it was blame. We raised our child. We supported them. We showed up in the ways we knew how. I don't think missing one event, even a wedding, erases all of that. A wedding is a day. Important? Yes, but still a day. Life doesn't stop because someone gets married. What hurt the most wasn't even the anger. It was the tone. Like we were selfish villains instead of parents who made a difficult call. Like our years of effort didn't count because we didn't perform the right gesture at the right moment. Since then, things have been tense. Short replies, distance. A feeling that we're now being measured and found lacking. It's made me rethink how much energy I keep putting into trying to meet expectations that seem to shift depending on who's asking. I don't feel guilty for protecting what was in our care. I do feel tired of being told that having boundaries automatically makes you heartless. At some point, adult relationships go both ways. So I'm here asking, were we actually wrong for not attending? Or is this a case of an adult child expecting unconditional sacrifice while offering none in return? Do boundaries only count when they're convenient for one side? Update 1. It's been a little over a month since I made my original post, and things haven't smoothed over the way some people suggested they might. If anything, the distance that was already there has just become more obvious. After the wedding, contact dropped off fast. At first I told myself it was just life settling down after a big event. Then I noticed there were no calls unless we reached out first. When we did, the responses were short and polite, the kind you send when you're trying not to start an argument. There were no casual check-ins, no random updates, nothing. We weren't even told about smaller things we usually would have been included in. It felt intentional. I didn't chase it. I've done that before, and it never ends well. My spouse and I talked about it and agreed we were tired of explaining ourselves over and over. We had already explained the situation with the dog multiple times. The reaction we got made it clear that the explanation didn't matter unless it ended with us doing what they wanted. So we stopped trying to soften things. The first real test came when we got an invitation to a small get-together at their place. It wasn't framed as anything dramatic, just something casual. A few months ago, I would have rearranged things to go, even if it felt awkward. This time, I didn't. I responded that we couldn't make it because the dog wasn't well enough to be left alone. Here's the part people are probably going to focus on. The dog was fine that day, stable even, no vet visit pending, no emergency. I knew that when I sent the message. I still sent it. I didn't do it in a dramatic way. I didn't add commentary or make a point of it. I used the same explanation we'd already given before. Part of me wanted to see what would happen when the excuse they dismissed as unacceptable was used again, without apology or extra detail. It felt fair. If our reason wasn't good enough the first time, I didn't see why I needed to keep coming up with new ones. After that, the invitations slowed down even more, but the few that did come all got the same response. There was a situation where they asked for support around a medical appointment they were anxious about. Again, we declined. Same reason. Another time was a dinner celebrating a work achievement that clearly meant a lot to them. Same response. At some point, they confronted us and said it was obvious we were doing this on purpose. They said it felt like punishment and that it was childish to keep hiding behind the same excuse. I didn't agree with that framing. From my perspective, we weren't hiding. We were being consistent. We had set a boundary and stuck to it. What I said, and what I still believe, is that I'm done being put in a position where every no has to be justified to exhaustion. For years, if we couldn't attend something, it turned into a negotiation. Every reason was picked apart, every concern minimized. I'm tired of that. If the explanation we gave once wasn't respected, repeating it isn't punishment, it's clarity. Extended family started to notice the pattern before long. A sibling asked why we hadn't been around. A parent hinted that maybe it was time to let things go. I didn't get into details. I didn't vent or badmouth anyone. I said the same thing I'd been saying all along. We had responsibilities at home and weren't able to attend events right now. Some people clearly didn't buy it. Others nodded and changed the subject. No one openly challenged us, but I could feel the judgment sitting there. I chose not to engage with it. I'm not interested in a family-wide debate about whether our reasons are valid enough. What surprised me was how calm I felt as this all unfolded. I expected to feel guilty or anxious. Instead, I felt steady. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't scrambling to manage someone else's disappointment. My spouse was fully on board, which helped. We were finally acting like a unit, instead of two people constantly adjusting to someone else's expectations. I know how this looks from the outside. I know people are going to say we're being petty or that we're escalating things instead of fixing them. Maybe there's some truth to that, but from where I'm standing, I don't see why we're the only ones expected to bend. Respect shouldn't only flow one way. Right now, I don't feel like reaching out to repair things. I don't feel like explaining, apologizing, or reassuring anyone that we still care in the right way. If contact stays minimal, so be it. I've spent too long chasing a relationship that only seems to function when we're the ones compromising. At this point, I'm done chasing. If that makes me the problem, I'll live with that. Update 2. A few months have passed since my last update, and things have changed in ways I didn't expect, even knowing how tense everything already was. Our dog passed away not long ago. It wasn't sudden, but that didn't make it easier. He declined quickly at the end, and the house felt strange almost immediately, quiet in a way that doesn't feel peaceful, just empty. My spouse and I handled it privately. We didn't announce it or make a big deal out of it. We took a few days off work, dealt with the practical parts, and tried to settle back into a routine that no longer included him. I won't pretend I wasn't deeply affected. That dog had been part of our daily lives for years. He was there when our child moved out. He was there during holidays that felt thinner than they used to. Losing him felt like losing the last constant in a relationship that had already been fraying for a long time. What stood out to me most was how alone it felt. People say kind things, but grief like that is still something you sit with by yourself. Not long after, our child reached out. The message was careful. Condolences, acknowledgement of how much the dog meant to us, and a suggestion that maybe this could be a moment to reset things between us. On paper, it was reasonable. In reality, it made me tense. I couldn't shake the feeling that the timing mattered to them more than the loss itself. That now that the original reason was gone, they expected everything to fall back into place. I know that sounds harsh, but that's honestly how it landed. There was no mention of what had happened between us before, just an assumption that this opened a door. I didn't rush to respond. When I did, I kept it neutral. I thanked them for the condolences. I didn't agree to reconnect. I didn't suggest meeting up. I needed space, and I wasn't willing to pretend that the last several months hadn't happened. Here's where things took a turn that I know will bother people reading this. Even though the dog was gone, I didn't change the explanation I'd been using. When invitations or requests came up, I still said we weren't able to attend. Sometimes I referenced not being in a place to leave the house for extended periods. Other times I kept it vague. The point was the same: we weren't available. It wasn't about logistics anymore. It was about emotional capacity. I wasn't ready to step back into a dynamic where every appearance felt like a test of loyalty. Losing the dog didn't suddenly restore my willingness to be pulled back into that. Then came the announcement. Our child told us they were expecting and wanted to get everyone together to share the news properly. This was clearly important to them. I understand that. I also knew immediately what would be expected of us and how our absence would be framed. We declined. Same reasoning. We weren't up for gatherings. We weren't ready. We wished them well and left it at that. That's when everything finally blew up. They accused us of deliberately missing their life. Not just this event, but all of it. They said the wedding was the beginning of the end and that everything since then proved we never really cared unless things were on our terms. From their perspective, this was a pattern, not a boundary. I didn't agree, and I said so. I reminded them that this didn't start out of nowhere. That the wedding wasn't an isolated incident, but the moment where years of being dismissed came to a head. That we were tired of being told our reasons weren't good enough. That respect shouldn't disappear just because someone is starting a new chapter. That conversation didn't fix anything, it just made the lines clearer. Word spread after that. The in-laws were openly critical. They didn't reach out to us directly, but it didn't take much effort to figure out how they felt. Extended family started acting differently. Polite, but distant. A few people quietly said they understood our side, but no one was willing to say that out loud. I can't say I was surprised. At this point, the relationship with our child feels damaged in a way I don't know how to repair without giving up ground I'm not willing to give. I'm aware that from the outside, it probably looks like stubbornness for the sake of pride. From the inside, it feels like the result of too many moments where we were expected to absorb disappointment without ever causing it. I don't feel good about where things are. I also don't feel desperate to fix them anymore. There's a difference. I've accepted that this may be as close as things get, and strangely, I'm okay with that. If staying connected means constantly being told we're failing, then distance feels more honest. Right now, it feels like something broke a long time ago, and we've just been arguing about the moment it became obvious. Update 3. It's been about a year since the wedding now. In that time, I've slowly realized that whatever story I thought was floating around about why we weren't showing up anymore wasn't the story people were actually hearing. I'm not naive enough to think silence keeps things neutral, but I genuinely didn't expect how thoroughly the narrative would flip without us even being part of the conversation. It started small. A family gathering we usually attend came and went, and no one mentioned it to us beforehand. At first I assumed it was an oversight. Then it happened again and again. Holidays started being referenced after the fact, not before. I'd hear things like, "Oh, you wouldn't have wanted to come anyway," said lightly, but with an edge that wasn't there before. Eventually, someone slipped. Not maliciously, just carelessly. They mentioned how hard it was for our child to explain to everyone why we weren't there for this or that, and how awkward it had been laying it all out. Chronologically, event by event. Every invitation declined, every excuse repeated, every absence stacked up in a way I'd never seen them laid out before. Once I realized that version was out there, I was furious. It felt like being tried and convicted without being present. The framing wasn't "they needed space" or "there was tension." It was painted as deliberate withdrawal, punishment, a pattern of showing up only when it suited us and disappearing when it didn't. Then the message came. It was long, longer than anything we'd exchanged in years. It didn't read like a spur-of-the-moment blow-up. It read like something that had been written, edited, sat on, and rewritten again. They went back further than I expected. Not just the wedding, not just the dog excuse, but years of moments they'd apparently been keeping track of. Times they felt support was conditional. Times affection was offered and then pulled back. periods where we went quiet instead of addressing issues directly. I won't lie, my first reaction was anger, pure, hot anger. I called it revisionist in my head, dramatic, one-sided. I told myself they were reshaping the past to justify cutting us out now. I reread it multiple times looking for exaggerations, anything I could point to and say, see, this isn't fair. But what made it harder was that it wasn't hysterical or cruel. It wasn't name-calling, it was controlled. That somehow made it worse. I didn't respond right away. I vented to my spouse instead, expecting full agreement like usual. That's when things shifted in a way I hadn't prepared for. They didn't immediately back me the way they always had. They said they understood why we dug our heels in at first, but admitted that somewhere along the line, it stopped being about standing our ground and started being about proving a point. That landed badly. I felt betrayed in a way I didn't expect to feel in my own house. I argued that we were allowed to protect ourselves, that refusing to chase someone who constantly moved the goalposts wasn't abuse or manipulation. They didn't disagree with that part. What they questioned was whether we'd known when to stop. I still don't know the answer to that. Not long after, there was a family emergency. Nothing dramatic enough to put details here, but serious enough that showing up mattered. We went. We didn't announce ourselves, didn't coordinate, just arrived. And we were turned away. Not loudly, not cruelly, just firmly told it wasn't appropriate and that emotions were already high enough. I've never felt smaller in my life. Driving home, it finally hit me that whatever control I thought I'd maintained was gone. I wasn't deciding the terms anymore. I wasn't withholding presence as leverage. I was simply excluded. That's the part I'm struggling with now. I can still justify each individual choice if I isolate it. I can explain why we skipped the wedding, why we stopped accepting invitations, why repeating the same excuse felt fair at the time. What I can't do as easily is look at the end result and say it worked. I don't feel vindicated. I don't feel respected. I feel like someone who drew a hard line and then watched everyone quietly walk around it. I haven't replied to that message yet. I don't know what to say that wouldn't either be an apology I don't fully believe or a defense that would only push things further out of reach. I didn't expect things to end up here, and I don't know what winning was supposed to look like anymore. Final update. I waited a few months before writing this because I needed to be sure nothing else was going to happen. No new blow-ups, no sudden messages, no surprise attempts to reopen everything. What happened next felt final in a way the earlier stuff didn't. We met in person, not by accident and not because of an emergency. It was planned. Neutral location, short window, no dramatic buildup, just something that clearly had an agenda. By then, I already knew this wasn't about repairing things the way they used to be. It was about deciding whether there was anything left to work with at all. The tone was calm, which honestly made it harder. There was no yelling, no insults, no emotional baiting. They laid out what they were willing to have going forward and what they weren't. A relationship was possible, but only if certain things stopped entirely. No more vague excuses. No more withdrawing to make a point. No more disappearing when feelings got uncomfortable. If we didn't want to attend something, we could say no, but it had to be honest and it couldn't be used as leverage. They also made it clear they weren't asking for a full apology tour or some emotional performance. What they wanted was acknowledgement that what we did had caused damage, regardless of why we thought it was justified. I did acknowledge that. I said I could see now that repeating the same excuse, even after it stopped being literal, came across as punishment, whether I intended it that way or not. I admitted that missing milestone after milestone stacked up differently on their side than it did on mine. What I didn't do was take responsibility for everything. I didn't agree that our entire relationship history was built on conditional love. I didn't accept that every boundary we ever set was really control in disguise. I didn't apologize for skipping the wedding itself. I still believe we had the right to say no, and I said that plainly. I wasn't willing to rewrite my intent just to smooth things over. That was the line. They listened, took it in, and then told us what that meant for them. They said they weren't going to chase accountability anymore. If this was as far as I could meet them, then the relationship would exist at a distance. Polite, limited, no expectations of involvement in major moments, no automatic inclusion. And that was it. There was no dramatic ending to the conversation. No last attempt to persuade. We left separately. It felt strangely procedural, like closing an account instead of ending something emotional. Since then, the outcome has been exactly what was laid out. We're not part of the inner circle anymore. News travels to us slowly, filtered, if it comes at all. Big things happen without us there. There are boundaries around access that aren't hostile but are firm. We're not consulted, not relied on, not expected. Extended family followed suit quietly. No one confronts us. No one argues. We're just no longer central. Invitations are selective. Information is limited. I can tell that, to some people, we're now categorized as difficult, rigid, or emotionally unsafe. Not villains, but not worth the effort either. I won't pretend that doesn't sting. At the same time, I don't feel like I lost my sense of self in this. I don't feel like I groveled or caved just to avoid consequences. I stood by what I believed were my rights as a parent and as a person. I just didn't fully account for what enforcing those rights would cost.